I've got thoughts from the SMU game about the offense and how they're playing well but still leaving points on the board. We'll talk about some guys that transferred in and maybe haven't lived up to expectations yet, or coaching staff isn't using them properly. We'll talk about that. And West Virginia coming to town this weekend. All that and more coming up next. Locked On Horned Frogs. It's your team every day.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
That's right, your team every day. I'm your host, Steven Simcox. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can also find us wherever it is you get podcasts in its audio form. I want to talk about the offense and specifically the offensive line here. I haven't done a great job the last few days of getting to some of the audience reaction, the comments on YouTube or emails that people have sent me. And so I'm going to do a more robust segment on tomorrow's show. I know I have emails from Greg. I have comments that I haven't responded to. I try to, be meticulous about either talking about it on the show or responding directly wherever it is that I get it. But I'll do a more robust segment tomorrow. I do want to talk about the offense, though, and a few things that people have brought up following the SMU game. So TCU wins 34-17 against the Mustangs, get West Virginia this week. They've won 3 in a row. And again, I was happy with the performance. I thought overall TCU controlled that football game. Once they went up 14-3, it was 14-10 at halftime, but the game never felt out of hand. It never felt like SMU was really threatening to take the lead, except maybe for that stretch there late in the second quarter where they scored and TCU couldn't capitalize or couldn't respond with a score, and then they had the ball right before halftime. But all that being said, end up winning the game by 17 points and feeling good about, where they were at the end of it. And I talked about this after the game and my post-game show. My biggest gripe about the offense right now is just struggling to convert in the red zone, situational things. And it's not only the offense. I thought the fake field goal call was strange. That's something you bust out maybe 2 to 3 times a season, some sort of special teams trickeration. And I thought it was weird that in that moment they decided to go with that play. It obviously didn't work. Jordy Sandy was stumbling as he took the snap, and then he just kind of threw it up for grabs. And then going forward on 4th and 4 when they were in field goal range, I also thought was kind of curious. But I get wanting to kind of put the dagger in the game and score a late touchdown to fully put that game away. But somebody commented on YouTube after that SMU game. It was Matt Clark. He said, got to give a little credit to the hurry-up offense. It seemed like the first time it actually helped and didn't hurt their overall production. So I've talked about the pace of this team a lot this year. In the offseason, I discussed sort of the murmurs that we had heard out of fall camp that they were going at just a lightning-fast pace. It's going to be really surprising to teams. That advantage hasn't really materialized as much as I thought it would. But, yeah, I think they played well against SMU. You look at the final stats, and they were fantastic. Chandler was 23 of 32, 261 yards and 3 touchdowns. Amani Bailey had 25 carries for 126 yards. And so they did a good job. Now, there's still some ingredients to a great offense I think this team's missing. They spread the ball around a lot. They don't seem to have just one guy at the receiver position that they're focused on getting the ball to. There hasn't been a lot of explosive plays. I think the intermediate passing game has been really good. But they haven't pushed the ball down the field a ton. We saw that more against Houston, had that touchdown pass to Warren Thompson and Savion Williams, but then Savion was kind of non-existent in the SMU game, and the vertical passing game was as well. But, they moved the chains, and I think this group moves the ball in between the 20s really well. It's honestly just the details and the situational things that have been plaguing them so far. And my main complaint about the pace of the offense is really just in the context of they'll have a big play, and this is not just a TCU thing. This is typical of most teams that run tempo consistently. But you get a big play down the field, and then you immediately get to the line and run a play. And like I've said before, I understand the logic behind it. You want to get the defense on their heels. You want to catch them in a situation where they can't even really get lined up correctly. But usually what they do in those scenarios is they just run like a simple halfback dive play or an inside zone run, and it doesn't feel like it's popping for big plays. It's typically like, a 1 or 2 yard gain. And so I don't understand the point. Like, I get what they're trying to accomplish with it, but maybe take a breath, take a second, find the right matchup, find the right play call, and then continue to capitalize on the momentum of the drive. But I think the pace of the offense aside, they have to get better at, instead of taking 3 points, getting touchdowns, getting more explosive plays, and converting in short yardage situations. And honestly, this was the first game when I was watching that I'm starting to get concerned about the offensive line. I thought they played really well against Colorado, and Colorado had kind of a makeshift defensive line with a lot of transfers. It was their first game all playing together. We talked about the rough patch in the Nichols game. It was mainly in the first half. They were able to establish to run better in the second half. Same with Houston, and it feels like this is an O-line that gets lathered up as the game goes on. That might be clipped out and taken out of context, but they seem to get going as the game gets on, which that's what you want, right? Like you want an offensive line that wears on people, that leans on people. In the fourth quarter, you're able to really exploit your advantages up front because they're at their best. But the consistency just hasn't been there. And in the first half of games, it seems like teams are bringing a lot of pressure, both in the pass game and in the run game, and they're blowing up plays. And so, in the SMU game specifically, there were multiple 3rd and 3, 3rd and 2 situations where they were just trying to run the ball with Amani behind the interior of that offensive line. And you would think, like, with the size they have up front, with Coleman and Lands and Willis Patrick, that would be a strength of this team. But just too many kind of short yardage situations where they're getting beat, where there's not enough push up front. I think in pass pro overall, they've been okay. I would say they've been above average in pass protection for the majority of the season. I think Chandler's had time to process. I also feel like the last, really aside from the Colorado game, and we've discussed this, he's done a better job of using his legs as a weapon, whether that's breaking tackles and getting loose down the field, or just breaking contain in the pocket and making things happen that way. And that's something that I feel like will get better as everyone works together and meshes together. But they just really don't have that push and that ability to pick up some critical third downs, and in the red zone, like, wear down its team and get some touchdowns with some of those inside runs. And so I want to see more consistency with that. And it could be just the fact that, this new group on the O-line. I mean, I thought I accounted for this as much as I could during the offseason, but Steve Avila is like a day one starter in the NFL. And Wes Harris was super experienced. Alan Ali is a guy that made an NFL roster and played really well for the Frogs last season. So hopefully as the year goes on, they'll get better at that. Another thing that I don't want to say I take issue with, because this is more of just, this is what, but Kendall really seems to like pulling his guards and tackles in some of those short yardage situations. And I don't love that in short yardage because the defensive line's going to be firing off the ball. I feel like slow developing run plays. And they had like a delayed draw on 3rd and 4, I think on their second drive of the game. And then, pulling linemen across the formation on plays where the defensive line's firing off and trying to blow the play up. I don't always see the point in that. And I think it's going to struggle to work if you're trying to, be good at the point of attack and open up holes for your running backs. But we'll see how that goes as the year goes on. I think right now they're still playing teams that haven't been able to take advantage of, the inconsistencies there with the offensive line. But West Virginia's got a good defense. This is an interesting matchup this week. I'm going to talk about it more in segment 3. West Virginia, they're winning games ugly. Like it's not the prettiest brand of football that you're ever going to see. They just beat Texas Tech 20-13, I believe was the final score in that one. But they're finding ways to win, and they did it with their backup quarterback. And Tyler Shuck, the Tech quarterback, broke his leg early in that game, and he was out, and so they had to transition to their backup QB as well. But bottom line is, like, they've beaten Pitt and Tech in back-to-back games now, and they've really done it without throwing the football super well. Like, it's been on the back of their defense and C.J. Donaldson, their running back, in this offensive line. So this is going to be a physical football game this week, and that is one concern I have. And SMU's better up front. We talked about during the week. They brought in some transfers from Miami and other Power 5 schools. They really wanted to beef up that defensive line and make that the strength of their team. I think they did a good job of doing that. And overall, like, I agree with you, Matt. Like, the offense played well, and they're doing a good job of being efficient and moving the chains. You got to finish drives. And, I think they're going to have to find a way to take the top off the defense more, because things are just so condensed right now. And one, I know people kind of roll their eyes at this, but one thing about, like, bend but don't break defenses is it's hard for offenses to put together 14, 15, 16 play drives, because I think we've seen this with TCU at times this year. Maybe one bad play can really set you back. You have a 4-yard loss on second down, running the ball, it's 2nd and 14. You get a good play going down the field, and you have a holding call or an illegal shift, and now it's 1st and 15 or 1st and 20. And if you're not a team that can get chunk yardage to account for that, I think it can be difficult to stay on schedule and move the chains. And so it really puts pressure on your offense to fine-tune those details. And I think TCU hasn't been great at that this year. Just some of the small things, situational football details that really matter if you're going to be known as a group that methodically drives the ball down the field, not from a pace standpoint, but from a play standpoint, and does it in 8, 9, 12 plays instead of 4 or 5 or 6. When we come back, does TCU have an issue with some of the transfers on the team? Did they miss on some guys with some evaluations? We'll talk about that next. It's Locked On Horned Frogs. It's your team every day. If you're hiring people, or if you own a small business, you know that talent acquisition, finding the right people for your business, can be a high-stakes wager. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you need to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs will help you find the right people for your team faster, and it's free, which is the best part about it. You can add your job to their hiring frame and your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you are hiring. They have simple tools like screening questions that make it easy for you to focus on the candidates with just the right skills and experience, so you can quickly, that's the key here, you can do this quickly, you can quickly prioritize who you need to talk to and what you need to do to get that position filled as quickly as possible. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege. Again, that is linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege. We thank LinkedIn for being a sponsor of the Locked On Podcast Network. Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. Okay, here in segment 2, had another question after the post-game show. This is on YouTube. It comes from the username Big Easy. He says, "Hey, Steven, haven't heard anyone address the transfers from Alabama. Seems like they were overhyped." Yeah, I'll address that situation. I don't love to this is just like a personal thing. I don't love to always single out individual players in criticism, because it's just sort of how I feel about college sports. But I will talk about, I'll talk about this situation. As far as the Alabama transfers, so Tommy Brockermeyer, who came over as a tackle, he was at Alabama for a few years, and originally was, the number 2 in his recruiting class. He was the number 2 overall player in the nation. I think that was a good pickup by TCU, type of player that you want to take a chance on. Tommy didn't really see the field at all at Alabama. And I'm, my bad if I didn't kind of make this clear with him, but everything out of fall camp was that he was going to be kind of a project. I don't expect him to play this year. I think this was TCU not really rolling the dice, but saying, okay, here's a guy that hasn't had much production at his previous stop, but we see the physical tools, we see the gifts, the size, the ability, and he showed a lot of that at the high school ranks. He played at Fort Worth All Saints and did the camp circuit and everything else that big-time recruits do. So, a bunch of evaluators saw him as the best lineman in the country at one point. It hadn't materialized at the college level, but, 5-star recruits are kind of like first-round draft picks. You'll see guys get waived, and then they get picked up by somebody else. And so they are taking a chance here with Tommy Brockermeyer on living up to that potential. But I don't feel like, he's somebody that's going to play much at all this season, if any. And so I feel like part of the process with him is just getting him integrated to the culture and the brand here at TCU, the football program, get a gauge on where he's at, and then hopefully he'll be a contributor for you down the line. Trey Sanders has had, the stat line is not eye-popping. 34 carries, 130 yards, 4 touchdowns. And I admitted this earlier in the season. Amani Bailey is clearly the lead back for this football team. And Amani's done a great job. He leads the Big 12 in rushing, if you're curious, if you didn't know. So he's doing a really nice job for this football team. He's run the ball well. He's your lead back. Trey is now at this point, I think he's a good change of pace back. He's your number 2 guy. Maybe his role increases as the season goes on, but I think Amani had 26 carries in that game Saturday, 25 carries in the game Saturday. It was where Trey had 6 and 1 reception. He does have 4 touchdowns this year. Had 1 in the Houston game and then 3 touchdowns in that Colorado game, and was a good red zone option in that Colorado game. Busted one outside for a touchdown in a short yardage situation. I think the thing with Trey is, and he's still recovering and trying to get his body fully together from that car accident he had a few years ago. And I feel like he lost a lot of his explosiveness with that. And he's said that, in interviews. And so it doesn't seem like he has the speed and explosiveness to be a 3-down back for them. But that's not what they're asking him to do. He's just kind of a change of pace guy. I feel like, when people talk about Trey, sometimes we're kind of spoiled with Marty Mercado last year because he was such a big part of the offense. And he was definitely a guy that, the times that Kendra was not available, he stepped in and did a really admirable job. And that playoff game against Michigan, he was a huge reason why they won that football game. He was that good running the ball and just being the lead back for the football team in the biggest moment of the year. I don't know if Trey can do that, but I think he is a serviceable, number 2 running back that as the year goes on, hopefully will get more comfortable. And I've seen more agility and explosiveness from him. He really likes hurdling people. He did that in the Nickel State game, and then he did it this past week against SMU too. The one against SMU didn't net a ton of yards after the hurdle, but it still looked really cool. And so that agility was there. But I got caught up in the spring game. I really liked his patience and his ability to kind of pick through the line and get yardage. And I've seen some of that in the games as well. But Amani's been really good at that too. As I said, he leads the conference in rushing right now. And the biggest thing to me that stood out is just how he's grown in, getting those dirty yards, if you want to call it that, where there's not much there, and he just finds a way to stretch out 2 or 3 yard runs to at least keep the offense kind of humming and keep them on schedule. That's super beneficial. And then finally, JoJo Earl. I really thought JoJo was going to be a huge part of this offense. That hasn't come to fruition to this point. He's had a few opportunities where he's just dropped the football, dropped what probably would have been a touchdown pass against Houston, and didn't end up having any catches in that game. Against SMU, had 1 catch for 12 yards. I know they tried to get him the ball on a little bubble screen, and that just didn't work. He dropped it. And so I would like to – I think he's an explosive athlete. I would like to see them try to get him some more opportunities. Maybe it is just bubble screens, behind the line of scrimmage stuff, or, quick passing game, throw it out to him, see if he can make a move and go. But we talked about this all year. The receivers room is just kind of so jumbled up right now. And It seems like Major Everhard is a guy that's also kind of emerged in that same mold as a really shifty, fast, quick slot guy who can take the ball and make things happen after the catch. And so I still feel like there's potential with JoJo Earl, but it hasn't materialized yet. He did have that one touchdown against Nicholls State. The thing that has really had me scratching my head is JoJo just doesn't look super comfortable on punt returns. And that was something like Darius Davis was so good at taking the ball to the house. But I think one thing I've noticed this year, and part of it is teams are doing a really good job of executing directional kicks, meaning like they're kicking to one side of the formation. They're trying to kick away from him, keep him from getting the ball in his hands and going. But there have been a few times this year where he's elected to not catch the ball in the air. And I mean, I understand like it's coming in quickly as a line drive and the punt team's bearing down on you. But he'll let the ball go and then it'll bounce and it'll roll for 6 or 7 yards. So, I mean, to answer your question, like I think JoJo and Trey have not been as much of a part of the offense as I would like to see so far. Hopefully that's something that changes as the year goes on. Tommy Brockermeyer, I feel like, is just someone who's not going to see the field much this year, but hopefully down the line he has an impact for this football team. When we come back, West Virginia, what do they bring to the table? We'll talk about them next here in Lockdown Horned Frogs. Athletic Brewing Company, it's time for our Game Changer of the Week. Our Game Changer of the Week this week, brought to you by Athletic Brewing Company, is Jared Wiley. 2 touchdowns, just a really good game from the tight end from Temple, Texas. Jared having a good season, putting together a great year so far, and he's a game changer. Athletic Brewing Company is a game changer. They've changed the game in the non-alcoholic beverage space. They have non-alcoholic beers that actually taste good, full flavor, well-crafted. They brew over 50 styles of craft, including IPAs, golden sours, and more. It's fit for any occasion. So if you're watching a big game or if you're watching your kids' game, tackling work or working out, you can enjoy one of their beverages. It's the fastest growing non-alcoholic brewery in the United States. So get on board. Go to athleticbrewingcompany.com and use the customer code LOCKEDON or promo code LOCKEDON to get 15% off your online order. Again, athleticbrewing.com. Use that promo code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON at checkout for 15% off. Athletic Brewing Company. They are fit for all times. There we go. All right, let's tackle segment 3 here. So West Virginia coming to town this week. Note if you're going to the game, it's 7 p.m. kick. And TCU put out the bat signal on Twitter today that they're doing a blackout. They're going to wear all black uniforms, night conference game, wear your black TCU gear, or just, wear something that's black and let's have a blackout. Let's make it a big-time environment for this game against West Virginia. Mountaineers, 3-1, as I said earlier. They lost their first game of the season to Penn State. It was 38-15, pretty lopsided. But then after that, I mean, they've handled their business. They beat Duquesne. They beat Pitt 17-6, which was the first time I was kind of like, okay, West Virginia. Mountaineers were picked to finish 14th in the conference. And then last week they beat Texas Tech. Texas Tech's 1-3, which that's hilarious. Baylor's also 1-3, in case you're wondering. But they beat the Red Raiders, and they didn't have their starting quarterback. Garrett Green, who I haven't seen an update today, he was out against Texas Tech because of an ankle injury. I believe he was a game-time decision, and they said he would be available if needed, so I would imagine he plays Saturday against TCU. But he has 402 yards passing this year on 47 attempts, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. But here's the thing about West Virginia. They run the ball well, and they have a very experienced, very good offensive line. C.J. Donaldson leads the team with 287 yards rushing. Jalen Anderson also has 125 yards rushing. Overall this year, they have 758 yards rushing and 636 yards passing. This is a physical football team. They want to come downhill and run the ball, which I think is actually good news for the TCU defense. Because we talked about what they struggle with. Teams that spread them out, put them in bad matchups, put their linebackers and safeties in one-on-one situations. You're not going to see a lot of that this week. This is going to be coming straight at you. We're running the football. West Virginia had their backup in there last week, Nico Mariocho. I probably butchered his last name. I'm very sorry. I watched the Tech West Virginia game, but I was watching it on mute on ESPN Plus for the most part. But one thing that stood out to me about that game, I thought their offensive coordinator did a really nice job of game planning that football game. They were pretty limited at quarterback, but they were using a lot of motion. They were kind of mixing up their run looks and a lot of high percentage throws, like short throws to the tight end, quick throws to your wide receivers, and then occasionally take a shot over the top. And so I thought they had a good balance. And they only ended up scoring 20 points, but they really controlled that football game. Their defense is legit. It's going to be a nice test for the TCU offense. You know, on paper, it's a game that I think TCU just has the athleticism and the ability that they should, if they capitalize on their opportunities, they should win. And win by a couple scores if they can score touchdowns in the red zone instead of kicking field goals. But, you know, West Virginia, they've surprised people so far. I think they have a clear identity and a clear game plan. And, you know, Neil Brown, like a lot of people thought he was down for the count and it was going to be over for him. But this has been a nice bounce back for this team so far. I mean, they're playing hard. They're playing well. Johnny Hodges was out last week with a hand injury, and Sonny Dykes said after the game that he's week to week. So basically they're just kind of evaluating it as it goes on. Shad Banks, I thought, did a really good job against SMU. This is a week, though, where I feel like they would actually miss Johnny Hodges. I know there's been a lot of talk about the defense. You know, you need to get that defense to be more athletic, sideline to sideline, and I think Shad does that well. But Johnny and Jamoy are so good at coming downhill and, you know, having good run fits and making plays. I'd certainly think Shad could handle it, but I just feel like if Johnny's available and he's part of this linebacking rotation, that'll be a huge deal. And Sonny said, like, Shad's basically like a third starter. You know, they had two outside linebackers on the field at all times. He's rotating in and out a lot at both those spots. But, yeah, it's going to be all hands on deck for this front seven because they're going to run the football. And, you know, I like the matchup on paper for TCU, but you got to go execute and get it done. And so we'll have plenty on and about West Virginia as the week goes on. We're going to have Matt Jennings on the show Wednesday. I'll have more thoughts for you on Tuesday. It's Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Let's keep getting that subscriber count up. Thank you, and hope you all have a good one.